Imagine this: a packed auditorium filled with people from diverse religious backgrounds. On one side, a Christian nun who has dedicated her life to God. On the other, a young Muslim man armed with critical questions about the concept of divinity. In Christianity, who will sway the audience? Watch until the end. The auditorium was a grand space, its walls adorned with intricate carvings and soft lighting that cast an almost spiritual glow over the audience. People from all walks of life had gathered here, some curious, others skeptical, and a few filled with hope that this dialogue might bridge gaps they had long struggled to cross in their own minds. The air buzzed with anticipation as Sister Maria, a Catholic nun whose serene presence exuded decades of devotion, stood poised on one side of the stage. Her habit, crisp and white, seemed to shimmer under the dim lights, symbolizing her unwavering commitment to her faith. Beside her stood Amir, a young Muslim man with piercing eyes that reflected both wisdom and youthful energy. He carried himself with quiet confidence, his demeanor suggesting he was ready to engage, not just in debate, but in genuine exchange. As the moderator stepped forward to introduce the topic, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Today, the moderator began, his voice steady, yet imbued with gravity, we will explore one of the most profound and contentious aspects of religious belief, the concept of divinity within Christianity. His words hung in the air like a promise, setting the tone for what would undoubtedly be an emotional journey. For many in the audience, this wasn't just about intellectual curiosity, it was personal. It touched upon questions they had wrestled with in the quiet moments of their lives. Who is God? What does it mean to believe? And how can we reconcile the complexities of our beliefs with the realities of human experience? Sister Maria's face softened into a gentle smile as she prepared herself for the discussion ahead. She knew that for her, this wasn't merely a matter of theology or doctrine. It was deeply intertwined with her identity and purpose. Every day since she had taken her vows, she had lived with the conviction that Jesus Christ was both fully divine and fully human, a paradox she embraced wholeheartedly. Yet she also understood the challenges inherent in such a belief. On the other hand, Amir's expression betrayed no hint of nervousness. As someone who had grown up learning about the oneness of Allah, the idea of a dual nature, God and man, had always struck him as perplexing. Still, he approached the conversation not with hostility, but with earnest curiosity, eager to understand perspectives different from his own. In that moment, as the two figures stood facing each other, the weight of centuries of theological discourse seemed to settle between them. This was more than a debate. It was a meeting of worlds, cultures, and hearts. Each person in the room could feel it, an unspoken understanding that what unfolded here tonight would resonate far beyond these four walls. The stakes were high, not because anyone sought victory, but because everyone yearned for clarity, connection, and perhaps even a little bit of grace. Amir took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to draw everyone's attention fully toward him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a calm authority that belied his youth. "Sister Maria," he began, addressing her, respectfully while maintaining eye contact, "I want to start by expressing my admiration for your dedication to your faith. It's clear from everything I've learned about you that your life is a testament to service and devotion." A polite murmur rippled through the crowd, acknowledging his sincerity. "But," Amir continued, leaning slightly forward, his tone shifting ever so slightly to reflect the seriousness of his question, "there's something I've always found difficult to reconcile. Your belief that Jesus is both God and man strikes me as fundamentally contradictory. How can an omnipotent, eternal being, who by definition transcends all limitations, also experience hunger, thirst, or fatigue? These are conditions that define humanity, not divinity. Doesn't this duality undermine the very notion of perfection?" His words landed heavily in the room, sinking deep into the consciousness of those present. Some nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the validity of his query, while others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how Sister Maria would respond. Amir paused briefly, allowing his question to sink in further. He wanted to make sure every listener felt its weight, not out of malice, but because he genuinely believed that understanding required grappling with hard truths. For many Christians in the audience, Amir's challenge struck close to home. They had grown up hearing sermons and reading scriptures that affirmed the dual nature of Jesus, but rarely had they been asked to articulate why such a belief made sense. Was it possible, they wondered silently, that their faith rested on assumptions rather than solid reasoning? Meanwhile, Muslims in the room found themselves nodding along, feeling validated by Amir's critique. To them, the unity of God was absolute, and any suggestion of division, even in the form of shared identity, felt irreconcilable. Yet, despite the tension his question created, Amir remained composed. His gaze never wavered from Sister Maria, conveying respect even as he pressed her for answers. In that moment, he became more than a debater. He became a seeker, inviting everyone in the room to join him in exploring the mysteries of faith. Sister Maria listened intently, her expression calm but thoughtful. When Amir finished speaking, she closed her eyes briefly, as if drawing strength from within before responding. Then, opening them again, she looked directly at him, her voice steady and warm. "Amir," she said, choosing her words carefully, "your question touches on one of the deepest mysteries of our faith. Yes, it may seem contradictory at first glance, but let me try to explain how I see it." She paused, gathering her thoughts, then continued. "We believe that when God sent his Son into the world, he did so not to diminish himself, but to elevate humanity. By becoming human, Jesus showed us what true love looks like, love that knows no bounds, not even the boundaries of suffering or death. His willingness to embrace human limitations was not a sign of weakness, but rather an act of ultimate humility and sacrifice." Her voice softened as she spoke, her passion evident in every word. Think about it this way. If God were distant and unapproachable, how could we ever truly know him? How could we learn to trust him, to love him, if he never walked among us? Through Jesus, God revealed himself in ways we could understand, as a teacher, a healer, a friend. And yes, as someone who experienced joy and sorrow, hunger and thirst, just like us. As she spoke, Sister Maria's eyes scanned the audience, connecting with individuals scattered throughout the room. Her message wasn't meant solely for Amir, it was for everyone listening. Tears welled up in the eyes of some listeners, moved by the depth of her explanation. Others sat back, processing her words, trying to reconcile them with their own understanding. "Does this mean Jesus was less than perfect?" she asked rhetorically, answering her own question before anyone else could. "No, quite the opposite. His humanity was part of his perfection because it allowed him to show us what it means to live fully, to love completely, and ultimately to give ourselves entirely for the sake of others." Her words lingered in the air, resonating deeply with many in the room. Even those who disagreed couldn't deny the emotional power behind her argument. For Sister Maria, faith wasn't about solving every mystery. It was about embracing the unknown with open arms and an open heart. When Sister Maria finished speaking, Amir waited a moment, ensuring he absorbed every nuance of her response before replying. Then, with a respectful nod, he began. "Thank you, Sister Maria, for sharing your perspective so beautifully. I can see the depth of meaning behind your words, and I appreciate the way you frame Jesus' humanity as an act of love. But allow me to probe deeper." He leaned forward slightly, his voice gaining intensity without losing its gentleness. "You mentioned that God humbled himself by becoming human. But isn't humility itself a limitation? If God is truly infinite, wouldn't humility imply finiteness? Furthermore, if Jesus' humanity was necessary to connect with us, doesn't That suggests that God, in his original state, was somehow disconnected from humanity? Wouldn't an all-knowing, all-loving God already understand our struggles without needing to become one of us? His questions hung in the air, challenging the audience to think critically about the implications of Sister Maria's explanation. Some heads tilted in agreement, while others frowned, sensing the complexity of the issue. Amir pressed on, his voice rising slightly but still measured. And what about miracles? We're told that Jesus performed incredible feats, raising the dead, calming storms, feeding thousands with mere loaves and fishes. If he truly experienced human limitations, how could he accomplish such things? Doesn't this duality create a logical inconsistency? At this point, several members of the audience murmured audibly, their reactions revealing the internal struggle Amir's questions evoked. One elderly man sitting near the front shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath, "It's complicated." Another woman clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles whitening as she wrestled with conflicting emotions, admiration for Sister Maria's faith and doubt stirred by Amir's logic. Amir concluded by turning his gaze toward the audience once more. "Let me ask you all this. Would it not be simpler, and perhaps more rational, to accept that God is one, indivisible, and beyond limitation? That he understands our needs perfectly without having to experience them firsthand? Is it possible that our desire for relatable deities sometimes clouds our judgment, leading us astray from the purest form of truth?" His final words left a lasting impression, prompting many to sit in reflective silence. Even Sister Maria appeared momentarily contemplative, her lips parted as though searching for the right response. After a brief pause, Sister Maria cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly, but carrying immense emotion. "Amir," she began, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, "you raise points that have troubled theologians and believers alike for centuries. And honestly, there are times when I myself struggle to articulate the fullness of this mystery." She hesitated, taking a deep breath before continuing. "But let me tell you something personal. Early in my life, I faced trials that tested my faith in ways I never imagined possible. There were days when despair seemed insurmountable, when the weight of the world felt too heavy to bear. It was during those moments that I turned to Jesus, not as a distant deity, but as a companion who understood my pain because he had walked the same path." Her voice broke slightly, but she pushed through, her sincerity undeniable. "Do you know what gave me strength? Knowing that even in his darkest hour, when he cried out, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?' Even then, he trusted. Completely. He didn't demand answers or proofs. He simply placed his trust in the Father's plan. That kind of faith inspires me daily. It reminds me that no matter how overwhelming life becomes, I am never alone." By now, many in the audience were openly crying, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the auditorium lights. Sister Maria's testimony wasn't just about defending her beliefs, it was about sharing her soul. She spoke not as a scholar or a theologian, but as a fellow traveler on the journey of faith, vulnerable yet steadfast. "I don't claim to have all the answers," she admitted humbly. "But I do know this. My relationship with Jesus is built on love, not logic. And sometimes, love asks us to embrace mysteries we cannot fully comprehend." Her words echoed softly in the room, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. Amir sat quietly for a moment, absorbing Sister Maria's deeply personal testimony. He could see the sincerity in her eyes and hear the emotion in her voice, and it moved him more than he expected. Yet, as much as he respected her faith, he felt compelled to push further, not out of skepticism, but because he believed that faith should withstand scrutiny, not shy away from it. He stood up slowly, his hands clasped together, and turned toward the audience. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying a tone of humility and earnestness, "let me ask each of you something very personal. His gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of individuals scattered throughout the auditorium. When you think about your relationship with God, do you find comfort in the idea of a deity who descends into human form? Or do you feel closer to a God who is eternal, unchanging, and beyond limitation? The question hung in the air like a quiet challenge, prompting introspection among the listeners. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, visibly engaged by the depth of Amir's inquiry. An elderly man in the front row raised his hand hesitantly, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I've always believed in one God, Allah, who is perfect and infinite. But hearing Sister Maria talk about Jesus' humanity makes me wonder if I'm missing something. Something deeper, perhaps." A young woman sitting near the back nodded in agreement, though she added, "At the same time, I struggle with the idea of God experiencing limitations. If he's truly all-powerful, why would he need to become human? Isn't that almost diminishing?" Her words resonated with many in the room, sparking murmurs of acknowledgement. Amir listened intently, nodding along as different perspectives emerged. Then, addressing the entire audience once more, he said, "What I'm suggesting is this. When we examine our beliefs, we must ask ourselves whether they align with reason and logic, or if we're simply accepting them because they've been handed down to us. Faith doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking. On the contrary, true faith thrives when it's rooted in understanding." His final sentence struck a chord, lingering in the minds of those present long after he finished speaking. For some, it was a call to action, a reminder to question and explore their beliefs more deeply. For others, it was an invitation to consider alternative viewpoints without fear or judgment. The atmosphere in the auditorium shifted subtly, becoming heavier, with thoughtfulness yet lighter with newfound clarity. As the discussion continued, Amir expanded on his earlier point, emphasizing the importance of balancing faith with rationality. "Religion," he began, his voice steady and deliberate, "isn't just about rituals, traditions, or inherited stories. It's about truth, a truth that transcends culture, language, and even time itself. And if we want to discover that truth, we must approach it with open minds and honest hearts." He paused, allowing his words to settle before continuing. "Two, often people confuse blind adherence with genuine belief. They accept doctrines without questioning, afraid that doubting might weaken their faith. But I believe the opposite is true. When we confront our doubts head-on, when we use our intellect to seek answers, we strengthen our connection to God rather than diminish it." Sister Maria, who had been listening attentively, nodded in agreement despite their differing views. She appreciated Amir's emphasis on intellectual engagement, recognizing that faith should never be at odds with reason. In fact, she often encouraged her students to wrestle with difficult questions, believing that growth came through such struggles. Amir then shared a story from his own life, illustrating the power of critical thinking in faith. "Growing up," he explained, "I remember asking my teacher why Muslims pray 5 times a day. At first, I didn't fully understand the significance behind it, but instead of dismissing my curiosity, my teacher encouraged me to research and reflect. Through that process, I discovered the profound spiritual benefits of regular prayer, not just for connecting with God, but also for cultivating discipline, gratitude, and mindfulness." His example drew applause from parts of the audience, inspiring others to share similar experiences. A middle-aged woman stood up and said, "I used to think Christianity was all about miracles and supernatural events. But when I started studying philosophy and science, I realized that faith can coexist with reason. It deepened my appreciation for both." Another man added, "For me, Islam became more meaningful when I understood its principles of justice, equality, and compassion. These aren't abstract ideas. They're practical guidelines for living a better life." As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that Amir's advocacy for rational thinking wasn't meant to undermine anyone's beliefs, but to empower them. By encouraging people to engage critically with their faith, he hoped to foster a deeper, more authentic connection to God, one grounded in both heart and mind. With the dialogue reaching a crescendo, Sister Maria decided to share something unexpected, a revelation that would leave a lasting impact on everyone present. Leaning forward slightly, she addressed the audience with a mixture of vulnerability and resolve. "Before we move on," she began, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "there's something I feel compelled to admit. As much as I believe in the divinity of Jesus, there are moments when I struggle to articulate it logically. There are times when I doubt, not my faith, but my ability to explain it in ways that make sense to others." Her honesty caught many off guard, including Amir, who looked genuinely surprised. But Sister Maria pressed on, her words flowing freely now. "You see, my faith isn't built solely on doctrine or theology. It's rooted in experience, in the countless times I've felt God's presence in my life. Whether it's through acts of kindness, moments of peace, or even challenges that ultimately lead to growth, I know He's there. And yes, sometimes that knowledge feels less like proof and more like trust." She paused, collecting herself before continuing. "But here's the thing. Trust doesn't mean ignoring questions or suppressing doubts. On the contrary, it means embracing them as part of the journey. When I first entered the convent, I thought I had all the answers. Now, decades later, I realize how little I truly understand. And yet, paradoxically, that uncertainty strengthens my faith because it reminds me that God is far greater than anything I can comprehend." Her admission brought tears to the eyes of many in the audience, who found solace in her willingness to be vulnerable. One young man stood up and said, "Hearing you say that gives me hope. I've always felt like I needed to have everything figured out to call myself a believer. But maybe faith is more about trusting the process than having all the answers." Another woman added, "It's comforting to know that even someone as devoted as Sister Maria still has doubts. It makes me feel less alone in my own struggles." Through her openness, Sister Maria demonstrated that faith isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. By sharing her imperfections, she bridged gaps between herself and the audience, creating a space where everyone felt seen and heard. As the evening drew to a close, the moderator stepped forward once again, his voice filled with gratitude and admiration. "What we've witnessed today," he began, surveying the room with a warm smile, "is nothing short of extraordinary. We've seen two individuals from vastly different backgrounds come together not to argue, but to learn from one another. And in doing so, they've reminded us all of the beauty of dialogue." He turned toward Sister Maria and Amir, extending his hand in appreciation. "Thank you both for sharing your insights, your experiences, and most importantly, your hearts. You've shown us that faith isn't a zero-sum game. It's a tapestry woven from diverse threads, each contributing to a richer whole." The audience erupted into applause, their enthusiasm echoing through the auditorium. Many approached Sister Maria and Amir afterward, eager to continue the conversation. Some thanked them for their courage and vulnerability, while others expressed newfound clarity about their own beliefs. One elderly woman hugged Sister Maria tightly, saying, "You gave me permission to embrace my doubts without losing my faith. That means more to me than you'll ever know." A young Muslim man shook hands with Amir, his eyes shining with excitement. "Your emphasis on critical thinking inspired me to dive deeper into my own faith. I want to understand it better, not just accept it blindly." As the crowd dispersed, the moderator gathered Sister Maria and Amir for a final reflection. "Do either of you feel like you won tonight?" he asked, smiling mischievously. Both laughed softly before responding. "Winning isn't the point," Sister Maria replied. "The goal is understanding, and I think we've achieved that." Amir nodded in agreement. "Exactly. This kind of dialogue enriches us all, regardless of where we stand. It's about building bridges, not walls." Their words lingered in the minds of those leaving the auditorium, serving as a reminder that faith, when approached with humility and respect, has the power to unite rather than divide. As the lights dimmed and the last few stragglers exited the auditorium, the weight of the evening settled over everyone present. What had begun as a simple debate had evolved into something far greater, an exploration of faith, identity, and humanity. Sitting alone in the now empty space, Sister Maria and Amir exchanged a knowing glance, their mutual respect palpable. "What did you take away from tonight?" Amir asked, breaking the silence. Sister Maria smiled thoughtfully. "I learned that even in our differences, we share common ground. We both seek truth, meaning, and connection. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, to listen with empathy and respond with love." Amir nodded, adding, "And to use our minds as tools for strengthening our faith, not barriers. Reason and spirituality don't have to oppose each other, they can complement one another beautifully." Their reflections echoed the broader message of the evening, that faith is a journey, not a destination. It requires both heart and mind, trust and questioning, tradition and innovation. For those who attended, the night wasn't just about debating theology. It was about discovering themselves and their place within the larger tapestry of human existence. As the final echoes of applause faded into memory, the auditorium grew, silent once more. But in the hearts of those who had participated, the seeds of understanding had been planted, ready to grow and flourish with time. And perhaps, in their own small way, they had helped create a world where faith could coexist, peacefully alongside reason, a world where every voice mattered and every perspective held value.